Lady Celia Ashe, her heart shattered by society's cruelty, has sworn off love. All she desires is the solitude of her estate and the silent comfort of the ancient stone circle at Dusk. Her peace is shattered by the arrival of Julian Thorne, a mysterious scholar with the eyes of a warrior and a past heavy with guilt. To the world, he is a quiet antiquarian. But in the hushed, violet hours of twilight, a deeper connection sparks. Now let's escape to the English countryside of Regency, England. The amber glow of the setting sun bled across the Wiltshire Downs, gilding the ancient standing stones of the Circle of Seven Sisters in a final, fiery benediction. To Lady Celia Ashe, standing at the edge of the long terrace of Hatfield Hall, the scene was one of profound peace, a peace that mocked the restless, wounded creature she had become. The air, perfumed with honeysuckle and the first hint of night-blooming jasmine, was soft as a sigh against her skin, yet she drew her lace shawl tighter about her shoulders as if chilled from within. "You will catch a chill, my dear," a gentle voice murmured beside her. Her Aunt Agatha, a sparrow of a woman with eyes that saw far too much, laid a comforting hand on her arm. "The dusk holds a dampness, you know." "I find it agreeable, Aunt," Celia replied, her voice low and melodious, though it carried a strain that had not been there a year before. "The daylight is so revealing. Dusk is kinder." Aunt Agatha's eyes, sharp as tacks, softened. "Kindness can be found in more than the light, Celia. It can be found in company. You have hidden away here for too long. Your heart needs more than just the whispers of the evening wind." Celia's gaze remained fixed on the horizon where the last sliver of sun dipped away. Her heart, that foolish, traitorous organ, had been thoroughly broken by the dashing, duplicitous Viscount Everley. The scandal had been quiet but vicious, a lesson learned in the cruel theatre of a London season. She had retreated to Hatfield, her childhood home now overseen by her affectionate but fussy aunt, determined to find solace in solitude and the management of her modest estate. Love, she had vowed, was a folly for those who had not learned its price. "Company often comes with expectations, Aunt. I am content with my books and my roses." "But you are not content, child," Aunt Agatha insisted, then brightened artificially. "Now, do not frown so. We have a guest arriving. A distant connection of your dear mamma's. A Mr. Thorne. He has taken the lease on the old dower house for the summer. A scholar, I understand. Quiet, respectable. You shall not find him taxing. A guest." Celia's heart, despite its wounds, gave a peculiar, anxious flutter. The dower house had been empty for years, nestled in a wooded copse half a mile from the hall, overlooking the very stone circle that now lay bathed in twilight. The idea of a stranger so close, intruding upon her private sanctuary of Dusk, was irksome. "When does he arrive?" she asked, a note of resignation in her voice. "Why, this very evening. His man brought word this afternoon. I have invited him to dine tomorrow, but I dare say he will be too fatigued from his journey to present himself tonight." Celia merely nodded, turning her face back to the gathering violet of the sky. A scholar. A bookish man, no doubt, with dust in his hair and no interest in the affairs of a wounded heart. Perhaps it would not be so bad. She could be civil, distant, and remain within the safe fortress of her own reserve. In the small, oak-panelled study of the dower house, Julian Thorne stood by the window, his broad shoulders tense. He did not see the breathtaking beauty of the dusk, he saw only the shapes of the land, the strategic placement of the trees, the way the shadows pooled in the hollows. His right hand, resting on the windowsill, bore a thin, pale scar that ran from knuckle to wrist, a souvenir from a battlefield not named on any map of England. The faint, persistent ache in his left leg was another. He was not, in truth, a scholar. Or rather, he was not only a scholar. Captain Julian Thorne, lately of His Majesty's service in a capacity that required more silence than saber-rattling, was here to heal. And to forget. A mission gone catastrophically wrong in the sun-baked hills of Portugal had cost him more than his health. It had cost him his faith in himself, his trust in clear-cut orders, and the life of a young lieutenant who had looked at him with unwavering belief. The official report called it unforeseen circumstances. Julian called it failure. He had resigned his commission and retreated into the persona of Julian Thorne, antiquarian, here to study the prehistoric stone circles of Wiltshire. The soft hoot of an owl broke the silence. He sighed, a sound of weariness that seemed to come from his very soul. This place, Hartfield, was his mother's girlhood home. A place of innocent memory. He had chosen it hoping its quiet would soothe the storm within. He had not counted on a neighbor, least of all the Lady Celia Ashe, whose own recent history of heartbreak had been delicately outlined in his great-aunt Agatha's voluminous correspondence. Another wounded creature. The last thing he needed was complication, or pity, or the sharp eyes of a society lady. The following evening, Celia dressed with more care than she had in months, selecting a gown of dove-grey silk that seemed to shimmer like the twilight itself. It was modest, unadorned, a shield of simple elegance. She told herself it was for Aunt Agatha's sake, to show she was not entirely a recluse. The mirror reflected a young woman of 22, with hair the color of dark honey swept into a graceful chignon, and eyes of a changeable hazel that could seem green in certain lights, grey in others. Tonight, they held a wary watchfulness. When Mr. Thorne was announced, she was standing by the fireplace in the drawing room, one hand lightly on the mantelpiece, composing herself into a picture of serene detachment. He entered, and the picture very nearly shattered. He was not what she had expected. There was no scholarly stoop, no air of absent-minded abstraction. Julian Thorne was tall, with the lean, powerful build of a man of action barely constrained by the impeccable but somber black evening clothes. His hair was thick and dark, swept back from a forehead that spoke of intelligence, and his features were strong, almost stern, until one looked at his mouth, which had a sensitive curve that belied the firmness of his jaw. But it was his eyes that arrested her. They were a deep, troubled blue, the blue of a twilight sky just before it deepens to night, and they held shadows that spoke of pain and a watchful intensity that missed nothing. He moved with a slight, almost imperceptible hesitation, a favoring of his left leg, but it did not detract from an innate air of command. This was no dusty academic. "Lady Celia," he said, his voice a low, resonant baritone that seemed to vibrate in the quiet room. He took her offered hand, and his bow was perfectly correct, but as his lips brushed her gloved knuckles, a current, shocking in its intensity, jolted up her arm. She saw a flicker in those blue depths, a momentary widening, that told her he had felt it too. "Mr. Thorne," she managed, retrieving her hand as if it had been scorched. "Welcome to Hartfield." "Thank you. It is a pleasure to be in such tranquil surroundings." His gaze swept the room, taking in the comfortable furniture, the shelves of books, the grand piano in the corner, before returning to her. "And to make your acquaintance. My aunt has spoken of you often." "All good, I hope," Aunt Agatha twittered, bustling forward. "Now, do come and sit down, Mr. Thorne. You must tell us of your travels. Celia, my dear, ring for tea." The evening passed in a blur of polite conversation. Julian spoke intelligently of Roman history and the mysteries of the stone circles, his knowledge evident but delivered without a hint of pedantry. He listened attentively to Aunt Agatha's gossip about the county, and turned his grave, quiet attention to Celia whenever she ventured a remark. Yet, beneath the civility, Celia was acutely aware of him. Of the way his long fingers curved around his teacup. Of the occasional fleeting frown that would touch his brow when he thought no one was looking, as if remembering something unpleasant. Of the sheer, solid male presence of him that seemed to fill the room and make the air hum. For his part, Julian found his carefully constructed detachment crumbling. Lady Celia was beautiful, yes, but it was a beauty tempered by sadness, a vulnerability she tried to hide behind a wall of gentle reserve. He saw the intelligence in her eyes, the quick understanding when he mentioned an obscure archaeological text. He also saw the faint, lingering hurt, a mirror to his own. She was like a rare, shy creature he had startled in a forest glade, poised for flight. The protective instinct it stirred in him was as surprising as it was potent. As they rose to go into dinner, he offered her his arm. She hesitated for a fraction of a second before lightly resting her fingertips on the black superfine of his sleeve. The contact was formal, minimal, yet it felt like a connection. He could feel the tension in her hand. "You find our countryside to your liking, Mr. Thorne?" she asked, looking straight ahead as they walked. "I do. It has a peace that is most restorative." He paused. "And you, Lady Celia? Do you not miss the gaiety of London?" A shadow crossed her face. "London holds little charm for me. I prefer the honesty of the country. Here, things are as they seem." "Are they?" The words were out before he could stop them, soft, almost to himself. She glanced up at him, her hazel eyes searching his in the candlelit hallway. I should like to think so. In the days that followed, a fragile, unspoken routine developed. Julian would spend his mornings amongst his books and maps, and in the afternoons he would walk, his footsteps invariably taking him towards the circle of 7 sisters. And more often than not, he would find Celia there. Their first meeting was accidental. She was sitting on a fallen stone within the circle, a sketchbook in her lap, capturing the way the afternoon light struck the central monolith. He approached quietly, but the crunch of gravel under his boot gave him away. She looked up, startled, the wary look instantly in her eyes. "I beg your pardon," he said, halting a respectful distance away. "I did not mean to intrude." "You are not intruding, Mr. Thorne. The stones are not mine to command." She closed her sketchbook, a defensive gesture. He gestured to it. "You are an artist?" "A dabbler. It passes the time." "Might I see?" He took a step closer, drawn by a curiosity he could not name. After a moment's hesitation, she opened the book and held it out. He took it, his fingers brushing hers. The sketch was not the work of a mere dabbler. It was sensitive, atmospheric, capturing not just the form of the stones but their ancient, brooding presence. "This is exquisite," he said, his voice sincere. "You have captured their soul." A faint blush tinged her cheeks. "You are too kind." "I am truthful." He handed the book back. "They seem to call to you, these old sentinels." "They do," she admitted, surprising herself with her candor. "They have seen so much. Joy, sorrow, ritual, time itself. They hold secrets without judgment. It is comforting." He nodded slowly, his eyes on the towering stones. "I understand that. In a world of noise and confusion, there is solace in silent endurance." Their eyes met, and in that shared glance, something passed between them, a recognition of mutual sorrow, a shared appreciation for the quiet dignity of this place. It was the first genuine connection, a tiny crack in the walls each had built. After that, their meetings at the circle became less accidental. Sometimes they would walk in a companionable silence. Sometimes they would talk, of books, of history, of the wildflowers that grew in the downland grass. Carefully, they skirted around the deep chasms of their personal pain, building a bridge of shared interests and small, daily discoveries. Julian found himself living for those hours of dusk. He admired the way the fading light turned Celia's hair to molten gold, the thoughtful curve of her lips as she considered a point he had made. He began to see the strength in her, the quiet resilience with which she had rebuilt her life. The urge to protect her evolved into a deepening admiration, and something more dangerous, something that warmed the cold places inside him. For Celia, Julian was an enigma. He was a scholar who moved like a soldier, a man of few words whose eyes spoke volumes. His kindness was never condescending, his intelligence never arrogant. He listened to her as if her opinions on Gothic architecture or the management of tenant farms were matters of great import. Slowly, very slowly, the ice around her heart began to thaw. She found herself smiling more freely, laughing at a dry witticism of his, feeling a flutter of anticipation as the afternoon wore on. The memory of Viscount Everleigh's facile charm began to pale beside Julian's substantial, steady presence. One evening, as they stood watching the sunset paint the stones in hues of rose and mauve, the silence between them was particularly profound. "They call this time the whisper hour in some cultures," Julian said softly, not looking at her. "When the veil between worlds is thin, and secrets can be safely told." Celia shivered, though the air was warm. "What secrets do the stones whisper, do you think?" He turned to her then, his face in profile against the dying light. "Perhaps they whisper of lost loves, of promises made and broken, of courage found and lost again. And do you believe in such things, Mr. Thorne? In whispers from the past?" "I believe," he said, his voice dropping even lower, "that the past is always with us, shaping the present. And that sometimes, to face the future, one must first confess the secrets of the past." His words hung in the air, charged with a meaning that seemed directed at her, and at himself. The atmosphere between them crackled with unspoken things. Celia's heart hammered against her ribs. She wanted to ask him, "What is your secret, Julian Thorne?"
What shadow lies behind those beautiful, sad eyes?
But courage failed her. It was a week later that the fragile peace was shattered. A London gossip sheet, sent by a well-meaning friend, found its way to Aunt Agatha's breakfast table. It contained a brief, sly paragraph about the rusticating Lady C, hinting that her retreat to the country was less about heartbreak and more about a certain interesting scholar now in residence at her estate. Celia read it with mounting horror, the printed words blurring before her eyes. The old shame, the fear of gossip and sly insinuation, rushed back, cold and choking. Viscount Everley had used such whispers to his advantage, twisting the narrative to make her seem the foolish, clinging woman. She would not go through that again. She fled to the stone circle, seeking its solid, silent comfort. But today, the stones offered no solace. They seemed to loom, accusingly. She had been a fool to let her guard down, to allow this friendship to develop. She had known better. Julian found her there, her back to him, her shoulders trembling slightly. He had seen the paper. His man had brought a copy. A cold fury had settled in his gut, not at the paper, but at the world that could so carelessly wound someone like Celia. Celia, he said, the use of her Christian name slipping out unbidden. She whirled around, her face pale, her eyes bright with unshed tears and a defensive anger that cut him to the quick. Mr. Thorne, have you come to see the subject of the latest audit? Do not, he said, his voice rough with emotion. Do not give those words power. They are lies. Are they?
She cried, the hurt spilling over.
They are the currency of my world, Mr. Thorne. A world you, as a scholar, perhaps do not understand.
A look, a walk, a conversation. It is all fodder.
I will not be its victim again. I cannot. So you would let them dictate your life?
Dictate who you see, who you speak to?
He took a step closer, his own pain making him fierce. You would hide away here forever because you are afraid of idle tongues? It is not idle to me. She shot back. You do not know what it is to have your character, your heart, shredded in public. To be made a laughingstock. You think I do not? The words exploded from him, harsh and raw. The control he had maintained for months splintered. You think my world, the one I left, is free of consequence and judgment? Where a mistake, a moment's misjudgment, can cost more than reputation. It can cost lives. He stopped, breathing heavily, shocked at his own outburst. The shadows in his eyes had come alive, swirling with a torment she could now fully see. Celia stared at him, her anger draining away, replaced by a dawning, awful understanding. What?
What happened to you?
She whispered. The fight went out of him. He looked suddenly weary, older. He ran a hand through his dark hair. I was a soldier, he said, the confession torn from him. Not just a soldier. My work was
clandestine.
Last year, in Portugal, I led a mission. The intelligence was flawed. We walked into an ambush. His voice grew hoarse. A young lieutenant under my command, a boy with a wife and a newborn child he had never seen, died because I trusted the wrong information. Because I failed. He turned away from her, his broad shoulders tense. I resigned. Not in disgrace, but in it. I carry it with me every day. This, he gestured to his leg, is nothing.
The real wound is here.
He pressed a fist to his chest. So you see, Lady Celia, I understand something of shame. Of carrying a secret that feels like it will crush you. Of wanting to hide from the world because you believe you do not deserve its light. The silence that followed was profound, broken only by the whisper of the wind through the grass. Celia's own troubles suddenly seemed smaller, put into terrible perspective by the weight of his guilt. She saw not a mysterious, strong stranger, but a man burdened almost beyond endurance. A good man, punishing himself for a tragedy that was not wholly his fault. Slowly, she moved towards him. She reached out, her hand hovering for a moment before she gently placed it on his arm. He flinched at the touch, but did not pull away. Julian, she said, his name feeling natural, right on her lips. You cannot blame yourself for the evil of others. You were betrayed, as I was. The fault lies with the betrayer, not the betrayed. He turned his head, his blue eyes swimming with a pain so deep it made her breath catch. It was my responsibility. And you bear it with a honor that the man who gave you false information likely never possessed, she said with a sudden, fierce conviction. You left that life. You are trying to atone, even if the only person you need forgiveness from is yourself.
Do not let the past steal your future, Julian.
Do not let it make you hide, as I have been hiding. He looked down at her hand on his arm, then up into her face. In her eyes, he saw no pity, only empathy, and a strength that mirrored the one he admired in her. The walls between them, built of secrets and sorrow, crumbled to dust in that moment. And what of your future, Celia? He asked, his voice a husky whisper.
Will you let the whispers of fools dictate it?
Will you hide from something real, because you are afraid? Her heart was in her throat. What is real? He lifted his hand and cupped her cheek, his touch infinitely gentle. The shock of it, the warmth, the rightness, stole her breath. This, he murmured. This is real. These weeks of talking with you, walking with you, feeling the cold inside me begin to thaw whenever you are near. That is real. The courage it takes to trust again, to hope again, that is the most real thing in the world. Tears spilled over and traced down her cheeks. He brushed them away with his thumb. I have nothing to offer you, he said, his voice thick. A broken soldier with a damaged name and a modest income. No grand title, no unblemished past. You have yourself, she whispered, leaning into his touch. And that is all I have ever wanted, without ever knowing it. A true heart.
An honorable soul.
Someone who sees me, not just a pretty face or a connection to be made. The last of the sunlight faded, leaving them in the soft, forgiving cloak of dusk. The stones stood witness, their ancient secrets now joined by two new, tender ones.
Julian bent his
head, his lips hovering over hers. May I? He breathed, the question a testament to the respect he held for her. In answer, Celia rose on her toes and closed the final, fragile distance between them. Their first kiss was not one of fiery passion, but of profound healing. It was a whisper against her lips, a promise, a confession, a benediction. It spoke of shared wounds and the first tender shoots of a love that had grown in the quiet soil of understanding. It was gentle and sweet, and it held the power to mend what was broken. When they finally parted, four heads resting together, the world had changed. The dusk was no longer a time for hiding, but for beginning. I love you, Celia Ashe, Julian said, the words sure and clear.
With all my wounded heart, I love you.
And I love you, Julian Thorne, she replied, her heart so full she thought it would burst.
My soldier, my scholar, my savior from the shadows.
Hand in hand, they walked out of the circle of stones, leaving the whispers of the past behind them. Ahead lay the path to Hartfield, now lit by the first silver stars of evening. Ahead lay a future that would demand courage, to face society, to build a life together, to forgive themselves and each other for old hurts. But as they walked, their fingers interlaced, they knew they would face it not alone, but together, their love a quiet, unshakable force forged in the forgiving light of dusk. And in the years to come, they would often return to the circle of seven sisters at day's end. They would speak of their day, of their children, of their hopes. And sometimes, in the hush of the whisper hour, they would simply stand in silence listening, not to the secrets of the past, but to the enduring, joyful whisper of two hearts that had found their way home at last in each other. The end. Thank you for watching. If you enjoy historical romance, strong heroines, and brooding heroes with hidden hearts, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the bell icon for more romantic tales. Moral of the story. True healing and a courageous heart are found not in hiding from our past wounds, but in the vulnerable sharing of them with someone who sees and values our scarred soul. Love demands the bravery to trust again, to forgive oneself, and to step from the shadows of yesterday into the hopeful dawn of a shared future.